The No Kings protests are not achieving much politically, but they are achieving something culturally. Whenever there's a No Kings protest, there's always a slew of content from like the chronically online, super political kids of the internet who pop on here and say, what did it achieve? What did it change? And I think the reason those kids feel like the No Kings protests are a waste of time is that the No Kings protests would be a waste of time for them. The chronically online, hyper-political, hyper-aware kids of the internet, they're only really talking and interacting with other chronically online, hyper-political, hyper-aware, very well-informed people. That's not who the audience for the No Kings protests are. If you go to these protests, a lot of it is like normal people, regular people, people who will tell you to your face, this is the first time in my life I've ever gone to a protest. That's an important shift in culture. That is slowly starting to normalize for a lot of people who have never felt like a political agent, a political actor before, that there's room for them, there's opportunity for them to become more politically engaged. No Kings have turned into a very safe way for people who don't want to do politics to start dipping their toe in the idea of becoming political people. And I get that that's kind of an ambiguous, ephemeral effect on the culture, but I have seen concrete, real effects on the culture as well. In a more practical angle, the No Kings protests have started to build an organizing infrastructure in the United States that I have never seen build up this fast and this robust before. I've met people at the No Kings protests that I'm now at Signal chats on talking about ICE. The No Kings protest is also a way for the shy normies to gently signal to other people like, yeah, I'm also not in love with Donald Trump right now. I occasionally run into friends and neighbors at the No Kings protests. The morning after, I scroll through social media and see like, oh, who do I know who actually went to one? You know, as a way of finding out like who is on what side here. And that is useful and usable information to me, right? I see that as an opportunity. I'm going to start talking to that person and say, hey, there's other ways that you can get involved if you want to. I also think some of these No Kings protests are helpful in that they do kind of help shift narratives. On Saturday, the town of Springville, which is just 20 minutes down the road from my house, a town with a population of 4,000 that is in a +10 Trump district, held its first ever No Kings protest. And when I tell people about that, a lot of them have been shocked. They're like, oh my God, Springville had a No Kings protest? Look, to say it was a +10 Trump district is to say 60% of the people voted for Trump. That means 40% of the people voted for Harris. That's not a tiny number. People get it in their minds that like rural communities are all in it for Trump, and that's not real. That's literally a delusion. Rural Trumpies will advertise the fact that they are in the Trump cult, right? They'll hang up the flag, they'll put on the bumper sticker. So now we got this environment where the Trumpies are driving around and looking out their car window and seeing all of this other Trump paraphernalia. And the non-Trumpies are also driving around looking out their car window and seeing all of this Trump paraphernalia. And it lulls the Trumpies into a false sense of security. They think that they're like a bigger force than they actually are. But it also lulls the non-Trumpies into a false sense of insecurity. It makes the normal people out here think, gosh, I'm the only normal person. I better hide that. I better keep it on the down low. Normally, I've been driving up to the city to go to the big No Kings in downtown Buffalo, but I was really excited to go to like this little town rural one, right? That seemed to me to have like a greater impact. I mentally have what it takes to deal with the fact that I live in a community that's like a 60-40 split for Trump. But the Trumpies don't have that, right? They have the neurology that can only accept their community as being like binary, like for or against Trump. And having to force them to drive down Main Street in Springville to see a bunch of people holding signs that say, fuck Donald Trump, I think that it would be really triggering for some of them, which I'm happy for. I'm glad to shove that down their throat because that's the only way that it works, right? Trumpists and conservatives, they are going out of their way not to learn things. The only way they can learn about the world around them and the realities around them is if they are forced to against their own will. If they were willing to learn things on their own accord, they wouldn't be conservatives, right? So I do agree that the No Kings protests are not really achieving much of anything at all politically, but I do not agree that they're not achieving anything at all, right? Like the little town of Springville, New York now has an organizing infrastructure. Like that event was organized by some people who were there. They signed up with Indivisible. They printed out like little safety pamphlets, little safety cards, and were handing them out to people. There's folks with the yellow vests from the Peace Center that were down there now who are telling people to stay off the sidewalk, you know, stuff like that. And that organizing infrastructure will morph at some point. Those people all know each other now, right? They have a listserv. They have trust with each other. One of them will run for office one day, and they're going to call friends that they made at that protest and organizing that protest to help run their campaign. These protests are tools and they're opportunities. And if you're feeling like they're not achieving anything, you got to work harder. You got to turn on the lights in your brain. You got to get a little bit more creative and find ways that they can be helpful.